Was the price Frodo paid for saving Middle-earth just? Or is it a theft beyond reckoning? As Tolkien wrote, Frodo received a grace costly beyond telling. But grace for whom? The ring was destroyed, the Shire saved, yet its greatest hero ended his days as an exile. Welcome to Middle-earth Unveiled, where we explore Tolkien's world with reverence, wonder, and a deep love for the truths hidden beneath the tale. Today, we follow Frodo not just to Mount Doom, but beyond it, into the sorrow, sacrifice, and sanctification that shaped his final fate. If you find meaning in stories that echo beyond the page, consider subscribing. This is a refuge for those who still believe that myths matter. For fans who know the films, remember Frodo's haunted eyes as he tells Sam, "We set out to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me." For readers familiar with Tolkien's deeper works, this mirrors the fate of Eärendil, forever barred from the lands he saved. Through a web of clues scattered across Tolkien's works, we discover that Frodo's suffering wasn't just collateral damage, it was inevitable. You've likely celebrated the ring's destruction as a triumph, but have you considered that Frodo's reward was actually the most bittersweet punishment in Middle-earth? The Ring-bearer's fate reveals something profound about how heroism functions in Tolkien's world, not as glorious adventure, but as sacrificial dissolution. For casual viewers, Frodo appears as a traumatized war veteran. For those versed in Tolkien's letters and philosophy, his journey represents the sanctification through suffering that Tolkien, as a devout Catholic, believed was the highest form of heroism. Picture Frodo Baggins in Bag End's threshold after the quest. The air tastes of dust and disquiet. The hearth lies cold. His words to Sam cut to the heart. "I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me." This isn't just post-traumatic stress, it's what Tolkien called being wounded with knife, sting, and tooth, and a long burden. For a lot of us, Frodo's departure to the Undying Lands seems like a happy ending, sailing into the sunset. For readers of Tolkien's extended works, it represents something more complex, an act of mercy that is simultaneously an exile. This paradox is crucial. Frodo's salvation comes through his permanent displacement. Trace his spiritual journey. He begins in the Shire innocent and whole. In Mordor, we see him progressively diminished, stretched thin, both in body and spirit. And finally, at the Grey Havens, he seeks a healing that lies beyond the circles of the world. You see, the Shire was his cradle, Mordor his crucible, and the sea his severance. There are journeys from which one returns changed, and then there are journeys one never truly returns from. In The Return of the King, Sam notices Frodo becoming transparent in Mordor, not just metaphorically, but spiritually. For book readers, this hints at his eventual fate, too worn to remain in Middle-earth. For film fans, the Grey Haven scene feels like bittersweet farewell. For Tolkien scholars, it represents a profound theological statement about martyrdom and grace. The sea salt air at the Havens contrasts sharply with Mount Doom's sulphurous fumes, both places where Frodo surrendered something essential. But what does it say about Middle-earth that its savior cannot heal within its borders? The answer lies in understanding Tolkien's view of heroism, not as triumph, but as sacrifice that transforms both world and hero. Frodo's first punishment wasn't physical pain, but the inability to ever fully heal from it. For casual viewers, compare Aragorn's coronation, where all wounds seem forgotten, to Frodo's quiet confession, "I am wounded, wounded. It will never really heal." The films show his shoulder wound, but cannot fully convey the spiritual damage Tolkien described. For lore masters, Frodo's wound echoes the Morgoth-inflicted wounds of Medros and Fingolfin injuries that transcend the physical. This is a battle between mortal resilience and immortal damage. In Jackson's films, we see Frodo clutch his shoulder on the anniversary of Weathertop. In the books, Tolkien writes, "He was ill again in March, and the malady hung on until May and the anniversary of his terror at Shelob's lair." What most readers miss is that Frodo's wounds follow a liturgical calendar of suffering, each anniversary bringing fresh pain. Consider these passages. From Return of the King, Frodo said, "I am wounded. It will never really heal." From Tolkien's letter, number 246, Frodo received a grace costly beyond telling. Notice the theological language. Tolkien frames Frodo's suffering not as misfortune, but as sacred wound, what Catholic theology calls redemptive suffering. This is where things get truly fascinating. Frodo's wounds aren't just memories of trauma, they're physical manifestations of spiritual damage. The ring-bearer didn't leave Middle-earth because he was sad. He left because he had become fundamentally incompatible with it. Film viewers see Frodo grow thin in Mordor, but the books reveal a more profound thinning of his very being. We saw in the movie the One Ring's burden visibly withers Elijah Wood's Frodo. For scholars, this physical diminishment symbolizes what Tolkien called becoming thin and stretched, like butter scraped over too much bread. What if the ring's effect wasn't just addiction, but existential dispersion? The closer Frodo comes to Mount Doom, the more his presence in Middle-earth diminishes, as if the coordinates of his soul are shifting toward another realm. His experience mirrors Bilbo's much slower fading after decades with the ring. In both cases, the ring doesn't add power, it subtracts substance. But this leads to an even deeper question. How did Frodo's thinning unfold? Step by step across the journey. In the beginning, he tries to name it. "I feel thin, like butter scraped over too much bread." In Mordor, the change becomes visible. Sam looks at his friend and sees it. Frodo's face was pale, almost transparent. And after the quest is done, it's Merry who says what no one else dares to admit. "He was too deeply hurt, Sam. He tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for him." You might think this fading was simple exhaustion, but Tolkien makes it clear it wasn't. In one of his letters, he writes, "Frodo was sent or allowed to pass over the sea to heal him, if that could be done, before he died." This wasn't recovery, it was life support. Consider how the elves fade and depart to Valinor when their time in Middle-earth ends. Frodo's departure parallels this, suggesting he had become more than mortal, yet less than whole. Why couldn't Frodo enjoy the Shire he saved? For film fans, Peter Jackson cuts the scouring of the Shire, making Frodo's alienation harder to understand. But for readers of the books, his inability to reclaim his home reveals Tolkien's thesis on heroic sacrifice. The Shire itself was reborn. The books state, new trees were growing up fast. There would be orchards once more. But Frodo's spirit was not. "I am too deeply hurt, Sam. I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me." Sam can return to gardening and family, but Frodo sees Middle-earth through altered eyes, a sensory dissonance of being physically present, but spiritually elsewhere. For readers familiar with the Silmarillion, this mirrors the fate of Tuor and Eärendil mortals, who became so entwined with immortal burdens that they could no longer dwell among their kind. Now, we need to examine what Tolkien himself said about this. Tolkien wrote seemingly contradictory explanations. In letter number 246, "It was not for lack of love for the Shire or its people that he left." Yet he also writes in letter number 238, his psychological state was such that he could not simply become happy again. The contradiction resolves when we understand Frodo's alienation wasn't about happiness. It was about ontological displacement. Frodo didn't leave because he was unhappy. He left because he no longer belonged to the same order of being as the Shire. Think about it. What happens when a person has been fundamentally changed by bearing something beyond mortal capacity? The answer is tragic. They can no longer fit within the world they saved. It is one of the oldest tragedies that those who bear the heaviest burdens return not as heroes, but as strangers to the very world they preserved. The Undying Lands are typically seen as reward, but for Frodo, they represent both mercy and judgment. For casual fans, the Grey Havens scene feels like heaven. For scholars, it's a complex, theological statement on mortal limitations. The films capture the white shores and far green country, but miss Tolkien's crucial detail. The immortals return to the Undying Lands, not to enjoy, but to be healed and make ready for their specific functions. What if Frodo had refused this passage west? His fate would likely mirror Gollum's tortured half-existence. Let's look at this from another angle. The name Undying Lands sounds like a promise, but it doesn't mean that mortals who go there will live forever. Undying describes the nature of the land itself, a place untouched by time, not a gift of immortality to those who enter. And when the Valar allow Frodo to sail west, it isn't a reward for success. It's an act of mercy, what Tolkien calls pity in his letters. When Arwen gives Frodo her place on the ship, it's linguistically significant. She exchanges mortality for his chance at healing. This mirrors how Frodo's sacrifice allowed others to live normal lives while he could not. In The Return of the King, Arwen looks at Frodo and speaks the quiet truth. But you have been too deeply hurt. And in his letters, Tolkien explains what that meant. Frodo was granted a divine enhancement of the natural healing of his body and mind. Not a miracle, not a cure, but a sacred kindness extended to someone who had given everything. Most readers see the Undying Lands as paradise, but for mortals, they represent a profound displacement healing at the cost of everything familiar and loved. Isn't it striking how Tolkien's greatest reward for his hero is actually a sentence of eternal expatriation? Frodo's fate wasn't reward, it was consecration through sacrifice. For film fans, the ship sailing into sunset suggests peace. For Tolkienists, it represents what Catholic theology calls redemptive suffering, pain that transforms and sanctifies. From innocent hobbit to wounded savior, Tolkien shows heroism as a crucible that fundamentally alters the hero. What could be more profoundly just than a fate that both honors sacrifice and acknowledges its cost? This, dear viewers, is the profound paradox of Frodo's destiny. Tolkien describes Frodo's final state with deliberate theological language. Frodo was sent or allowed to pass over sea to heal him, if that could be done, before he died. He went both to a paradise and a purgatory. This paradise and purgatory language reveals Tolkien's Catholic framework. Salvation involves both reward and purification through suffering. From Frodo's perspective, the Undying Lands weren't simply reward, they were the only possible continuation of his existence. In Tolkien's world, salvation is not clean or painless. It is the ache that follows mercy. Paradise is never unshadowed. Even the Undying Lands shimmer with the salt of things lost. Consider how Tolkien, a veteran of World War I, witnessed friends forever changed by trauma. Frodo's fate reflects Tolkien's understanding that some wounds change a person so fundamentally that they can never fully return home. The films show Sam watching the ship disappear with tears streaming down his face. But the books present something more profound. "Well, I'm back," he said. Sam's simple acceptance of continuing life contrasted with Frodo's departure. Many readers miss that Frodo's passage west isn't simply going to heaven. It's a special dispensation that acknowledges the impossibility of his healing within Middle-earth. This isn't just reward, it's recognition that he has become something other than he was. Consider this. Frodo began as a simple hobbit who loved the Shire. He ends as someone who has transcended his own nature through suffering. And that's the ultimate justice. In saving Middle-earth from the ring's corruption, he was transformed into something that can no longer exist within it, a living testament to both victory and cost. Frodo's arc isn't about triumph or failure. It's about sanctification through sacrifice. For casual viewers, his departure feels sad but necessary. For scholars, it's a profound theological statement on the nature of heroism. The real victory, not the ring's destruction, but Frodo's transformation. Why does Tolkien deny his hero the conventional happily ever after? Because in Tolkien's moral universe, the greatest heroism demands the greatest cost. You see, Tolkien wasn't just telling a fantasy story. He was illustrating his deeply held belief that true heroism transforms the hero, often painfully. In his letters, Tolkien explicitly rejected the idea that Frodo failed. Frodo had done what he could and spent himself completely, and he would have been an infinitely worse person for refusing. Imagine if Frodo had remained unscathed, returning to the Shire to live a normal hobbit life. The ring's destruction would be cheapened, a burden carried without cost. Instead, Tolkien shows that world-changing sacrifices change the sacrificer. From Bilbo's adventure with its treasure and glory, to Frodo's quest, ending in wounding and exile, this evolution shows Tolkien's maturing vision of heroism as crucible rather than conquest. And here's what makes this relevant to our lives today. How often do we expect to face challenges without being changed by them? Like Frodo, we may find that our greatest contributions to the world leave us fundamentally altered, sometimes in ways that create distance from our previous lives. Frodo deserved his fate not because cosmic justice demanded reward, but because his sacrifice transformed him beyond Middle-earth's capacity to heal. His passage west represents both the honor due to his sacrifice and the tragedy of its cost. In Jackson's films, we see Frodo's physical journey. In Tolkien's books, we witness his spiritual transformation. Together, they reveal Tolkien's profound understanding of heroism as both victory and loss. The final image of the ship sailing toward a setting sun, captured beautifully in the film, embodies this duality: beauty and sadness, departure and arrival, ending and beginning. In the end, Frodo got exactly what he deserved: recognition that his sacrifice placed him outside the normal order of Middle-earth. A grace costly indeed, but perfectly tailored to the price he paid to save the world. This has been Middle-earth Unveiled. Thank you for your time, dear friend. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing. That really helps a lot in telling the YouTube machine that we deserve a glance.